Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Mainstream Indie Music channel. We talk about all things indie music, and today, very interesting take and controversial, more than likely, because Ryan Ross, Panic at the Disco. A lot of people, of course, heard Panic at the Disco. In fact, we have done a video already on this channel about the Pretty Odd era and kind of the fallout from Pretty Odd as an album. I will say this to begin. I was in my late teens, I would say mid to late teens, when Fever came out, and when Pretty Odd came out, I'd say pretty much late teenage years, almost 20. I was right in the middle of all this. I remember A Fever You Can't Sweat Out coming out. I remember Pretty Odd coming out. I remember when the 9 in the Afternoon music video was released. And a lot of people, I remember specifically a very close friend of mine, was a huge Panic fan. And he was very confused about 9 in the Afternoon. He did not like it. Now, as a Beatles fan and as a huge fan of psychedelic rock, I loved, and still to this day, still listen to the Pretty Odd album. I love it. But I'm also an interesting Panic at the Disco fan because, for example, my brother and I split and get into fights about this. Not like serious fights, but fights and discussions about this. I personally am a huge Brandon Urie fan before he sold out, especially these last few years. But I believed that Brandon Urie had more raw talent than Ryan Ross. Now, don't get me wrong. There is no doubt that Ryan is a better songwriter. He's probably even a better musician overall. No doubt about that. But I thought, of course, Brandon Urie's voice, is way better than Ryan's voice. That we're going to get into that a little bit into the band's history here in just a little, but he's also a pretty good dang musician himself. Brandon's no slouch. He can play a lot of instruments. In fact, I think it's the Too Weird to Live. I always forget the name of that album, but you know what I mean. The one with This Is Gospel and Miss Jackson on it. Where supposedly, I think it's that album, he played every single instrument on that album. If it wasn't that one, it was one after that. Maybe it was Death of a Bachelor. But anyway, with that, all that being said, the band history, my personal thoughts and opinions, living through pretty much the rise and fall of Panic at the Disco, Ryan Ross is very underrated. And I don't think he's hated, to be fair. I don't think people hate the guy. I don't even think a lot of Panic at the Disco fans blame him for what happened to Panic at the Disco. But, it was obvious that they had reached a fork in the road. Now, before we get to that split decision, just a quick recap. I'm not going to, beat this to death. There are 1,000 videos online about Panic at the Disco and what happened, including very well-researched ones. If anything, this is, again, given from the perspective of somebody who lived through this, that was there for all of this, and what happened. Panic at the Disco, right, when they were first formed, it was with Ryan and Spencer. And when they got, a collective group together, including Brandon Urie, Ryan was still picked as kind of the band leader and the lead vocalist of the band. And I don't know if it was for lead guitar or if it was just kind of for a backup or rhythm guitar. Brandon Urie was selected. But of course, it probably only took a few times with bands, with band practice before people realized, oh my God, Brandon has an amazing singing voice, that just far outweighs Ryan's. And the switch was made. Brandon was made the lead singer of the band. Now, I've been in bands, I've performed in them. I've never been the lead singer. I've either been the rhythm guitarist or the drummer. So I've never had a political side, but I have seen that happen where there's a leader of the group and then somebody else comes along who's just way more talented naturally. So, of course, the band goes with the new person. And there definitely is friction there. Even if, the person claims that there's not, there is friction there. I think it definitely just started back then. Now, of course, A Fever You Can't Sweat Out and Pretty Odd. There are a huge shift in tone for the writing, the lyrics, then the musical composition compared to the entire rest of Panic at the Disco's discography. It's much deeper. There's a lot of layers to it. And it's still weird. I know a lot of Panic at the Disco fans were kind of upset with Brandon after Ryan left because he's singing these kind of very personal songs that Ryan wrote because he had a very messed up childhood. But here he is on stage singing these deep personal songs. And, of course, the longer Panic at the Disco was being a band, eventually Brandon kind of phased out a lot of early Panic at the Disco songs, maybe just except for, of course, I Write Sins and 9 in the Afternoon. I think after that, the rest of them were scrapped. But what happened to Ryan afterwards? So the split happens, right? Now, a lot of you probably know The Young Vanes, which was Ryan's and, what was his name? John Walker, their side project. Well, not side project. That was the band they formed after leaving Panic at the Disco. Very Beach Boys, a little sprinkle of Beatles in there, but I would say it was more the Beach Boys psychedelic stuff. Think of that as that album. It went lukewarm. A lot of old Panic fans that kind of followed them over. To be fair, they love Ryan Ross, but they like the sound of Panic at the Disco. They like Brandon Urie as well. So they weren't too sold on it. However, after that, Ryan pretty much just had a hard time with stardom. He was not a big fan of being a celebrity, and it showed because pretty much after The Young Vanes was over, he called it. They've never been a band ever since. He's performed and popped up in random shows since then, like Fall Out Boy he's popped up with. And another interesting band that he did a collab with was Phantom Planet, which had another former Panic at the Disco member, Dallin Weeks, along with that band. So kind of interesting, but honestly, more than anything, Ryan is just perfectly fine just doing what he wants to do. I mean, definitely he's got the money. Now he doesn't need to go out and perform. He does so, I think, solely for the art, and he doesn't want recognition anymore. What do you guys think of Ryan? Do you think there's any other drama going on? Let me know in the comments. See you next week.